Hey guys, how's it going? First, sorry about last week. I really thought I was going to be able to do those live lectures, and I was just getting so sick, and I didn't realize how sick I was going to get. So thank you for being patient with me. Sorry I had to cancel those, and for those few of you who did log in, thank you for that. I really do appreciate you. Okay, so today we're going to make a short video. We're just going to we're going to talk about the Great Depression and the causes and effects. So right now you should be working your way through, you should already be done with your Roaring Twenties modules. I hope you guys found those interesting. The Roaring Twenties was an interesting time of success, the big boom period, and it's an interesting time period in American history because of how sharply contrasted it is with the next kind of era, if you will, of American history, and that is the Great Depression. So remember, the Great Depression starts at the end of the 20s. Spurred on by the market crash in 29. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so what is it? Okay, the Great Depression. This is a big juicy definition. Sorry, I don't like to put this much text on there, but go ahead and pause it if you want to read this fully. I'm just going to skim it. Basically, it is a worldwide economic downturn. That's a good way to say that, actually. That began in 29, lasted approximately until 39, when the United States will start ramping up. Oh, excuse me. The United States will start ramping up for World War II. It was the longest and most severe depression ever experienced by the industrialized Western world, sparking fundamental changes in economic institutions, macroeconomic policy, and economic theory. So that progressive era that we've spoken about a lot in this class is actually going to continue all the way through the 30s. And in fact, these progressives are gonna see the Great Depression and be inspired by it, and they're going to use the Great Depression as clout to continue their goals, all right, their progressive era reforms. And it will go all the way through the early 30s. You'll see um, working conditions, government guarantees, federally backed loans, those kinds of things will all be booming during this time period. Let me mute my phone. I just realized I'm probably going to have an interruption. Okay, very good. So, this guy you need to know, this is President Herbert Hoover, 31st President of the United States. He'll be the president during the crash. So we'll talk about him more in a minute, okay? So, there are 5 reasons or 5 causes of the Great Depression, okay? Some people think falsely that the Great Depression was caused by the stock market crash. That is not true. So you can't say that it is that alone is the cause. It's probably more like the Great Depression and the stock market crash are both derivative of the same conditions. They're both derivative of the same causes. Does that make sense? So the causes are a symptom um, of the same problem. Does that make sense? Okay, so number 1, disparity of incomes. 2, buying on credit. 3, the farm economy will collapse. Low taxation of wealthy. And 5, stock market speculation. So we'll go through each of these, and I hope I remember them. It's been a while. Okay, so the farm economy. First thing you need to understand about... Oh, man, the webcam's in the way. Let me move it. Can I do that? Yeah, let's go up here for this one. Okay, the first thing you need to know is that that farmers are going to try to counterbalance the drop in prices. Okay, so what you'll see here is that as the economy starts to struggle, as people are making less money, farmers are tempted to to solve their financial problems in a simple way, which is if you make something for a living and you want more money, it's pretty obvious that you should make more of it, right? Well, unfortunately, that's actually wrong because, as you guys may remember in your basic economics over your years doing social science, what happens when you have too much of a product? Prices drop even further. Supply and demand, right? So if you have an abundant supply of, let's say, corn, if there is so much corn in the United States, it it cheapens corn. It makes corn a cheaper commodity, and the prices will drop. And this will ironically cause even worse conditions for American farmers. So farmers will produce too much, crop prices will fall. And when we say fall, we mean bottom out for most of these farm products. Farmers will produce even more because of the demand to try to survive, and that will cause, it'll exacerbate the problem even more. And as a result of this, farmers cannot pay their loans, and they will default, which means they will go bankrupt. They will tell the bank, sorry, we ain't got no money. The bank is required by law to forgive the loan, which now puts a burden on the bank because the bank now has to eat that cost. This will put banks out of business. We're talking, guys, we're not talking about a couple farmers here. We're going to be talking about hundreds of thousands of farmers. This problem will happen to them. Now, you're probably thinking, well, what prevents that from happening today? And we'll talk about Great Depression reforms after the fact, like how has government responded to these problems? I know some of you are probably already thinking about that. Basically, just to give you a little sneak peek, the government prevents prices from dropping. The government regulates prices now of these commodities. Farmers can't set their own prices anymore. Corn costs what corn costs. We'll talk more about this later. But if you want to, if you're interested now, you can Google what is the current price of corn. What is the current price of silver? What is the current price of soybeans? These are all regulated now by federal agencies in order to prevent these price drops. And this one's kind of weird. Some of you may know this if you have farming in your family. The government will actually regulate how much product you can sell. So as a farmer, you can only sell a certain amount of crops. They regulate how much product enters the market at any time to prevent an oversaturation of this commodity, which would then drop prices. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, hit me up. Where are we? Okay, buying on credit. So banks are going to start loaning money during this time period in a way that they never have before. People are going to start basically using credit cards. I want you to be thinking about that. Oh, I'm in the way again. People are going to start using credit cards like they never have before. Okay, they're going to buy things on credit, power equipment, homes. There's now a new consumer market like there never has been before. You can buy all sorts of things, luxury goods. American manufacturers are making all sorts of different things. So what happens is this credit will spike, right? Total credit market debt. You'll see we have a lot of debt, right? Here in 1930, 1935, we owe a lot of money to the banks. And then our market debt goes down, and look at us today. This is back in 2005, but we're way up high. We have a crazy amount of debt in America today. Anyway, creditors will stop loaning money, which means that people can't buy stuff anymore. This buying will result in a drop off, and when the market crashes, you can see that the market crashing actually just kind of triggers a lot of these already existing problems. So it's kind of like when we talked about back in the day, we talked about World War I, that the conditions were ripe for a war, and then the assassination of the Archduke kind of triggered it. Well, the conditions were ripe for a depression, and then the stock market crash is going to kind of basically trigger a lot of these things. Kind of like a Rube Goldberg machine, right? Where one leads to the other. That's the idea. So a drop in consumer spending equals layoffs. People aren't buying stuff. Companies can't afford to pay their employees anymore. Laying people off means they can't buy stuff because they don't have a job, which is now the great circle of a depression, which means companies can't afford to pay their workers. Because these workers aren't getting paid, they can't buy stuff to stimulate the economy even more, which causes now these other companies are gonna start laying people off, and it just spirals from there. Disparity of income. So we've talked about this a lot, so we don't need to harp on this too much. But basically, the progressives were talking about the inequality and imbalance in the American economy, but unfortunately, that won't be solved through the Great Depression, or through the 20s, I should say. Massive amounts of wealth inequality, as you can see by this chart. Excuse me. The wealthiest fifth have the overwhelming majority of the capital. Okay, they call it a maldistribution of wealth. That the wealth is concentrated in the uber wealthy. You guys have maybe read The Great Gatsby. The Great Gatsby is all about this. Okay, taxes. So not only do the wealth have a lot of money, but the wealthy are now going to be taxed at a lower rate than ever before. Okay, so World War One ends, and we absolutely we just cut taxes on the wealthy. I don't know. I mean, I know why, because there was a lot of money being made on the stock market, and greedy people are greedy. The legislatures were involved in this greed. They slashed the taxes for the wealthy. Now, World War II starts, and we tax the absolute heavens out of the wealthy. See this over 90% marginal tax rate, and then you see here we are back down to, and by today you'd see it even lower. Basically, we're back down to pre-depression rates. And as a history teacher, I'm not saying that that's a problem necessarily, and that we are definitely not seeing the conditions for another market collapse. And we definitely didn't see one in 2008 and 2009. Anyway, so who's paying taxes? The middle class. The middle class is overwhelmingly paying the tax burden in the United States. Okay? So why does this matter? Because government doesn't have any money to do anything. Government is very poor during this time period. They're running lean. So when crap hits the fan, as it's about to here in 1929, government doesn't have any money to help people. And now you might contrast with what's going on right now. Some of you might have been talking to your parents about the stimulus check. The government spent $2.2 trillion to bail out the American economy. And that actually, most economists are saying that it's working. $1,200 for each adult, $500 for each dependent child. You know, most families are getting over $3,000. That kind of money is a lot of money to put back into the economy to stimulate it. But during this market crash, there was no money for the government to infuse. There's no gas to put back into the engine, right? And so the engine's going to stall out and starve. So what is stock market speculation? It's the get rich quick idea. It's buying on margins. So what does that mean? It means it goes like this. When a company is publicly owned, that means that people can buy a portion of that company. Let's take Apple, for instance. You guys know Apple. They're a famous company. They make the iPhone and they make AirPods and all that stuff. Okay? They're a very big company. They're worth $1 trillion. And you can buy a portion of that company. If you go on a lot of these trading websites, you can buy a portion of Apple's stock. I don't know how much it's worth right now, but let's just say, for the sake of a good argument, you can buy a certain percentage of Apple stock for $100. Okay, for $100, you now are a very small partial owner, and there are millions of people who own Apple. It's a public company. Well, if Apple releases a brand new product like the AirPod, and the AirPods do really, really well, the value of that company goes up. And if you own stock, your stock might now be worth $200. So you see a 100% increase in value. But if that company does poorly, let's say they release a new iPhone and it's got a lot of problems, it doesn't work right, then the stock might go down, and now that stock's only worth $50. And how those are managed is more complicated, but we'll talk about that. If you're interested, you can let me know, and I mean, there's videos about it too if you want. But let's say it goes down. Now you've lost $50. Well, what buying on the margin means is that companies like Apple would actually loan people money to buy stock. So let's say when you bought Apple stock, you bought $100 worth of Apple stock. You didn't actually have that $100. You took out a loan from Apple to buy their stock. So Apple loans you $100. There's gonna be an interest rate. Let's say it's a 20% interest rate. So now you owe Apple $120 for $100 worth of stock. Now, why would you do that? Why would you borrow $120 to buy $100 worth of stock? Well, if you were confident that stock was going to, let's say, double, triple, quadruple, and you now have $400 worth of stock, you can pay back that $120, and you still have $380 of profit. So this is why they did it. It was a get rich quick, because if you borrowed some money in a new and upcoming business, or a business that you were sure was going to boom, you could literally become a millionaire overnight. And a lot of these people did that. And you might have heard of people playing the stock market today. So when the economy collapses, though, when the crop prices fall, when prices of consumer goods drop, and businesses are no longer worth as much money as they're worth, and stocks are now plummeting, and you owe money, it's borrowed money, these businesses are now in the hole even more, because they don't have that cash. They don't have that $100 of stock. They're loaning it to you. So what we're seeing is basically there is a shortage of actual capital. We see that during the Great Depression, we see a massive influx in speculation, is what it's called. It's called betting. And when you lose the bet, you lose the money. And who's losing the money? The consumers and the businesses. They don't have any cash. And so when times get hard, when prices drop, they have no cash to float. This is why you guys may have heard you guys hear about this? Ruth's Chris Steakhouse got something like $6 million in bailouts from the government just recently, like a couple weeks ago. And the a news story reported that Ruth Chris had $85 million of savings in the bank. Can you think about that? They had $85 million saved, and they still took money from the stimulus. And many Americans were very mad. Hey, Ruth Chris, what the heck, man? You've got all this money saved. These other businesses are going under, collapsing. Small businesses all across America weren't able to access this money, and Ruth Chris got millions and millions. It might be more than seven, actually. I have no idea what the numbers are, but a lot of millions. And America was really mad. Well, since then, Ruth Chris Steakhouse, a restaurant, right, has given back all that money. They're like, oh, yeah, sorry. I guess we didn't need to do that. Sorry. But the point is that Ruth Chris had $85 million saved. These companies during the Great Depression, during this time, had $0 in cash. Okay? Which means people had to sell their stock, which will drive the price down even more. When there's an abundance of stock, the value drops. Okay, I hope that wasn't too boring for you. So government tries to step in to help, and like we already kind of insinuated, the government is going to be very, very, very weak. In fact, this is a really interesting time to be studying the Great Depression, because what we just saw from the American government, what we just saw, this stimulus aid, we learned from the Great Depression. We learned that Hoover and the federal government was so powerless to actually help to stop the economy from crashing, that we now have new laws, new policies that allow the government to get involved in a much more robust way, to become much more involved. So here's what I mean. Okay, the government will issue a tariff on foreign goods, which they think is going to help make the government more money. But what actually it does, this tariff, it actually just means that other countries can't sell their goods in America because they're more expensive. American companies pass that tariff. It's a tax. So let's say I want to buy some goods from Europe, and the government has now an importation tax called a tariff. And so that thing I was buying from Europe now costs 20% more. Is the American company going to just eat that money, or are they going to raise the cost of their good by 20% when they import it? Yeah, that's exactly what they do. So now all consumer goods are 20% more expensive, let's say. I don't know the exact tariff percent. And so what that means is that Americans aren't going to buy anything. They're not buying. And so what does this mean? When they're not buying, these American companies are now out of business. And ironically, the government imposed the tariff, which further drove American companies out of business. So what do we do now? We don't impose tariffs now. We actually decrease taxation now to try to encourage spending. We make things cheaper to try to encourage spending. And unfortunately, we learned that through the Hoover administration's mistakes. Oops! Okay? Hoover asks for American companies to be tough, to stick it out. He asks for, God, this stupid thing. He asks for rugged individualism that you'll see there as soon as that goes away. We need Americans to be tough. Stick it out, Americans. Yeah, the economy sucks and no one has any money and we're all poor, but you guys got to be tough. We're Americans. Let's be tough. Prosperity is just around the corner, right? Well, what does this mean? It means that 25% of Americans are unemployed. Even now, guys, when you're hearing about these numbers, you're hearing about the numbers right now of the people that are unemployed in America. It's not 25%. That's right. You probably know somebody who's unemployed right now as a result of the coronavirus, as a result of the pandemic. Our unemployment rates are higher now, or excuse me, our unemployment rates are lower now than they were during the Great Depression. That's how bad it was. That millions of Americans are ordered to stay home, and people aren't shopping, people aren't spending money, and things are still better. And there's a few reasons why. Okay. So people will lose their homes, which means they'll go to the street, which will exacerbate their problem. People that still had jobs had their hours and wages cut, which makes their buying power lower, which will hurt the economy further. There was what's called a run on the bank. Okay, so let's say you hear that banks are going out of business. What does that mean? So here's how banks make money. If you guys didn't know, and I'm surprised at how many students in years past didn't know this. You take your money in the put your money in the bank. Okay, what does the bank promise you? The bank promises to keep your money safe, right? They have a big vault, so you're not going to get robbed. Imagine if you had to keep all your money at home, you might get robbed. Secondly, banks used to give you money back for allowing them to have your money. They would give you a percent interest, and they still do that, but it's like pennies. So like last year, I made like 50 cents on interest from America First. Thanks, America First, right? But they used to have to pay a higher rate of return on that by letting them keep it. But what a bank does is they take my money, so I've got almost all my money in the bank. What are you doing back there? little sneaker. Close the door, Liz. Thanks, babe. Um, okay, so they take my money. Let's say for the sake of argument, I have $10,000 in the bank. Okay, let's say I have $10,000 in the bank. America First is going to take that $10,000 along with all the other customers of the bank, and they're going to loan it out to somebody else. I have my van. We own a van. I have my loan through America First, and let's say we owe $10,000 on that van. So I put my $10,000 of savings in the van. I take out a loan of $10,000, which that doesn't make any sense. You would almost just buy the van, right? But let's say somebody else doesn't have any money in savings. They can borrow money. The America First will give them money to buy a van, right? Where does that $10,000 come from? Me. America First literally gives my money to someone else as a loan, right? So the question is, why do I trust them to do that? Well, I trust them because of federal laws that my money is available to withdraw whenever I want. So will I be literally withdrawing the same money that I put in? No, I'll be withdrawing just from the pool of money, right? And how does America First make money? Because when they loan out money for a van, they're going to charge interest. So let's say they charge 5% interest on $10,000, whatever that is, $500 or whatever, right? They're going to make money off of it, and that's how banks make money. But here's what happened when the economy started to go down. When the economy started to crash and banks were going out of business. What does it mean for a bank to go out of business? I go to America First and I say, "Hi, America First, I would like to withdraw my money." Oh, yeah. Oh, because here's the other thing I forgot to tell you. Banks will invest your money on the stock market. That's right. Banks take your money and they will invest it in the stock market. They will buy stocks. So if they buy a stock that's worth $100, and because of the problems with the economy, that stock is now worth $1, they have lost $99. And if that happens a bunch, they're out of money. They've spent all of my money. It's gone. So if I go to the bank and say, "Hi, I'd like to withdraw my money," the bank says, "We don't have it. We're out of business." Then I say, "Uh-oh, I'm in trouble." So then I go home and I tell my aunt, "Hey, Auntie, guess what? My bank went out of business. I don't have any money." She hears this and goes, "Oh, my bank might be going out of money. I'm going to go get my money out of the bank before they go out of business." They call this a run on the bank, or a bank scare. So here you see a picture of hundreds of people trying to go into the bank to withdraw their money. Now, ironically, what happens when everybody takes their money out of a bank? The bank goes out of business. They can't loan money. They can't pay off their bills and things, right? They go out of business. So a run on the bank, a scare, basically a bank scare is what it's called, will cause the very problem that the people who are going to the bank are trying to avoid. Now we actually have laws about this. Banks can only withdraw a certain percentage of their total assets at a time to prevent a run. Basically, if there was a run, a scare on the bank, kind of like there was during this pandemic, people were trying to withdraw their money. I heard about a lady who wanted to go withdraw her money. She posted this to Facebook. "I went to America First to go pull my money out, because the world's ending, right? The pandemic, and she wanted all of her money, and they wouldn't let me have it." That's right. That's what the rules are. That a bank is only allowed to allow people to withdraw a certain percentage of their total assets to prevent a run on the bank, to prevent a bank from going. They need to have a certain amount of money to maintain their business. Now, it's an interesting question because are you free to go get your money? No. Your freedom is restricted. But is that in order to prevent a different type of freedom? Or is that in order to protect a certain type of freedom? Yes. Are these people free? No, they're broke. So we've taken away your freedom to withdraw your money in order to kind of like maintain freedom. I think that's kind of interesting. So like we talked about, unemployment goes through the roof, right? We're going to see through the 30s here, it's bad. We're going to see several government interventions. A new president will take over named Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and he's going to try to re-stimulate the economy by hiring millions of Americans. He calls this plan the New Deal, and we'll do another video later about the New Deal. But basically, he's going to try to stimulate the economy. This is unemployment rates. Unfortunately, it won't be until the FDR's policies help a little bit, but it won't be till World War II where we're pumping money into the economy, building tanks, building jeeps, making bullets, making clothes, right? And it will re-stimulate the economy. So a few side things you need to know. The Great Depression is famous for its soup kitchens. You will see long, long lines in cities of people waiting to get food. These are all soup kitchens. See the bags and pails. They'll go get soup and bread. The government will have to basically give food away. This will be the beginning of the modern welfare state. We talked about it during the progressive era as far as like there's unemployment and things like that, but the government can't pay unemployment. Right now the government is basically just trying to keep people alive. Okay, bread lines as they're also called. Bread lines and soup kitchens where people will literally wait in line for food so that they can feed their families. It's really sad. Hoovervilles. This is a picture of a Hooverville. The government, and this is a Hooverville as well, the government will build shacks in open fields or open lots throughout cities and suburbs. And they're named after President Hoover. And obviously they're named after him ironically because they're not happy with President Hoover. Thanks a lot, Hoover. I used to have a nice house, but I lost it when I couldn't pay my mortgage, and now I live in a shack in these really dirty, run-down places known as Hoovervilles. When I went to North Ogden Junior High, there was a boom of student population, and because we didn't have computers, I don't know how they didn't see it coming, but they were like, what? So many more students than we expected. What do we do? So North Ogden Junior High had to install literally 8 or 10 portable classrooms because there wasn't enough classrooms. And we all called it Hooverville because it was kind of dumpy. You know how those portables are. Okay, the Dust Bowls. So here's what you need to know. In the Midwest, the southern Midwest, specifically around Oklahoma, Arkansas, Iowa, these kinds of places, mostly Oklahoma, these farmers will over-farm their land trying to fight the depression. So we need food for the depression. The crops aren't worth anything because the price is bottomed out, and so they farm, and they never let the soil rest. It's a crop rotation. You need to let the soil rest. You need to fertilize the soil. And what happened is this topsoil dried out and turned to dust. And we will literally create giant dust storms. We're talking about millions of acres of land that is no longer farmable, and giant literal like storms of dust, something you'd see out of like the Ten Commandments, right? These a plague almost would sweep across the land. You'll find. Let me find some more pictures. I want to show you. Dust Bowl storms. Yeah. I mean, guys, this is truly like this is some crazy stuff. Check this out. So you'll see these. Look at this. These giant storms will fly through the neighborhood. Let me see. Dust Bowl. Yeah. So you'll see. Look at this one. You'll see homes completely buried. This was a farm. This was someone's property, and now it's almost buried. You'll see doors. Like you can't even walk into these homes anymore because they're completely covered in dust. Look at this one. Just dust piled up on the window. This was a massive ecological disaster. This was a man-made environmental crisis. And if you're interested in this, you can study how they over-farmed the topsoil. The topsoil broke down and it turned into dust. And you will see thousands and thousands of immigrants called Okies, people from Oklahoma, who will move to places like California and cities trying to find work. Most of them will go to California. Have you guys ever heard of a book called The Grapes of Wrath? The Grapes of Wrath is all about a family moving from Oklahoma. They throw all their stuff on the back of a car and they try to make it to Oklahoma. And let's not worry about the bonus army. Basically, it was a group of people who basically the army, the American army, will actually march on Washington, D.C. demanding their salaries because the government wasn't going to pay them. And so they literally, like, with guns out, like, surrounded the White House kind of a thing. Yeah, it was kind of crazy. So people will be undernourished, schools will close, men will abandon their families because of the lack of work and the shame. Suicide rates will go up, the birth rate will drop. People don't want to have kids during this. Yeah, like I already talked about family abandonment there. People look to the government for help and they're not finding it. Like I said, birth rates will drop. Okay, we're not going to watch this video, but I highly recommend that you do if you want to know more about it. Here's another good one. Oh, okay, don't actually read that. That's for tomorrow's activity. So, guys, email me if you have any questions about the Great Depression. I hope this video will answer at least some of the basics. Remember those 5 major causes of the Great Depression. There's going to be a quiz on Thursday, so make sure you watch this video. Thanks so much. Sorry that was half an hour long. I believe in you. Catch you later.